Nearly 2,000 years ago, in the heart of ancient Jerusalem, a moment unfolded, quiet yet seismic, that would alter the course of human history. Jesus of Nazareth was led away like a lamb to be sacrificed. According to Christian theology, the root problem of humanity lies in sin, a spiritual force that severs the bond between mankind and its creator. But within this brokenness came a divine resolution. Jesus, called the Messiah, became the sacrificial offering, taking upon himself the weight of humanity's guilt. His death was not merely a historical execution. It resonated with ancient symbolism. The Passover, when the blood of a lamb caused the wrath of judgment to pass over the homes of the Israelites. As the New Testament boldly proclaims, Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. Spring, this message calls countless Christian pilgrims from around the world to the city of Jerusalem. Many carry large wooden crosses as they walk the Via Dolorosa, the path believed to trace the final journey of Jesus toward the site of his crucifixion. That path ends at a place called Golgotha, a word that in Aramaic means the place of the skull. Today, this sacred site is marked by a cross mounted atop the dome of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, one of Christianity's most revered landmarks. Yet, just north of the Old City lies another compelling location, a rocky escarpment that strikingly resembles the shape of a human skull. This place is known as Skull Hill or Gordon's Calvary, and some believe it may be the actual site of the crucifixion. Between these two sites, the oldest tradition points firmly to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. For nearly 2 millennia, Christians have come to this place, venerating it as the ground where the ultimate act of sacrifice was made, where the wrath of God passed over humanity. But a question remains: is this truly the place where Jesus was crucified? In this documentary, we will examine the archaeological and historical evidence surrounding this sacred site. Through ancient texts and modern discoveries, we will assess the authenticity of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and uncover what it reveals about one of the most pivotal events in all of human history. According to Mark 15:22, they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. The earliest known and venerated site of Golgotha lies within the ancient city of Jerusalem, in what was once the Roman province of Judea. Historical sources recount that around 1,700 years ago, during the reign of Emperor Constantine, early Christians built a church over what they believed to be the very location of Christ's crucifixion. Over the centuries, the site saw destruction, conquest, and rebuilding, each layer adding to the complex history of a place now known as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Significant archaeological insight emerged in the 1960s when archaeologist Virgil Corbo conducted excavations beneath the church. Among his most compelling discoveries was a layer of soil, untouched by architecture, Desecration, that contained signs of ancient agriculture. This layer, free of human construction, suggested that the area had once been outside the city walls, aligning with biblical descriptions that Jesus was crucified outside the gate. Such evidence invites us to look beyond the surface and into the very soil of history, where faith and fact intertwine, and where perhaps the story of the cross truly began. Beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, a silent witness lay undisturbed for centuries, a layer of agricultural soil that predates the surrounding architecture. When archaeologists excavated this stratum, they uncovered seeds of grapes, figs, olives, and other cultivated crops, botanical remnants of a long-lost agrarian landscape. These discoveries provide more than a scientific insight. They offer a window into the environment of early Roman Jerusalem, precisely the era in which Jesus lived, taught, and was crucified. The agricultural layer affirms that this site, long venerated as Golgotha, once existed as a garden, not merely a symbolic one, but a literal, cultivated space. This fact carries remarkable significance when set beside the Gospel of John, which records, "In the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden." John 19:41. The correlation between the biblical narrative and physical evidence is striking. It reinforces the credibility of the traditional site and gives fresh depth to the ancient belief that the crucifixion occurred here, among groves and vines, not far from the city walls. But the work of archaeology did not stop with the Holy Sepulchre. In the 1970s, distinguished Israeli archaeologist Nahman Avigad led an ambitious excavation of Jerusalem's Jewish quarter, unearthing some of the most illuminating finds of the modern era. As layers of history were peeled away, Avigad and his team revealed streets once tread by Roman soldiers, merchants, and early Christian converts. Beneath the ruins of Roman-era Jerusalem lay deeper foundations. The remnants of cities built atop cities, each layer telling a different chapter in the saga of this sacred land. Among Avigad's most influential contributions was its reconstruction of the Byzantine city, dating from approximately AD 324. The dawn of Christianity's rise as a dominant faith across the Roman Empire. In his findings, Avigad documented the layout of ancient Jerusalem during the Byzantine period, paying particular attention to the Cardo Maximus, the city's principal north-south avenue. This thoroughfare functioned not only as the heart of civic life, but also as a conduit through which new spiritual ideologies traveled and took root. Even today, the Cardo Maximus endures. Visitors to Jerusalem's Old City can walk alongside its stone columns, weathered but still standing. Nearby, a vivid mural reconstructs the scene as it may have appeared, bustling with traders, pilgrims, and processions. In one of his excavation squares, Avigad uncovered the base remains of massive pillars, resting directly upon the preserved pavement of the Byzantine era. These stones, still anchored where ancient builders placed them, offer not just architectural insight, but a tangible connection to an era when Christianity reshaped the identity of Jerusalem. As we trace these enduring pathways of stone, we find ourselves not merely studying the past, but stepping into it. And with every layer unearthed, the evidence continues to suggest that the Jerusalem of today is built upon the truths, beliefs, and bloodshed of ages past. Beneath the remnants of the Byzantine Cardo Maximus, something older, and far more profound, was concealed beneath layers of stone and time. As Nahman Avigad's excavations continued, his team unearthed the traces of a city wall, dating back to the early Roman period, precisely the era in which Jesus lived and was crucified. But it was what lay between two preserved sections of this wall that ignited scholarly intrigue, a visible gap that clearly outlined the remains of an ancient city gate. The discovery prompted immediate comparisons to the writings of Josephus, the first-century Jewish historian whose records remain indispensable to our understanding of Second Temple Jerusalem. In his account, Josephus mentions a gate known as Geneth, one of the entrances through the first wall of the city. Could this be the very gate described nearly 2,000 years ago? Avigad believed it was, and his reasoning was compelling. The name Geneth is rooted in the Hebrew word for garden. In antiquity, gates were frequently named after the areas they faced or led toward. A gate called Geneth, therefore, likely opened toward a garden, perhaps the very one referenced in John 19:41. In the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden. Avigad carefully documented the location of this ancient gate on his topographical plan of Byzantine Jerusalem. Just a short distance away on the same map, he marked the site of the original Church of the Holy Sepulchre, established by Emperor Constantine in the 4th century AD, a structure long believed to enshrine the location of both the crucifixion and the burial of Jesus. What made the convergence even more striking was that earlier excavations at the Holy Sepulchre, particularly those led by archaeologist Virgil Corbo, had already uncovered physical evidence that the area once functioned as a cultivated garden during the 1st century AD. Thus, the findings of Avigad and Corbo did not stand alone. Instead, they interlocked, confirming and reinforcing one another across layers of time, through scripture, soil, and stone. This leads to a compelling possibility that the traditional site of Golgotha, long venerated as the place of Jesus' crucifixion, was not only a garden, as the Gospel of John describes, but also located just outside a city gate, precisely as stated in Hebrews 13:12. Jesus also suffered outside the city gate. In time, the gate Avigad uncovered came to be known as the Garden Gate, a title reflecting both its geographic orientation and its spiritual resonance. This was the passageway that led directly to the garden unearthed by Corbo, to the hill long believed to be Golgotha, the place of the skull. By the Byzantine era, the city of Jerusalem had expanded well beyond its earlier Roman boundaries, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre stood within its new walls. But beneath that newer layer of civilization, archaeology reveals the contours of a much smaller city, the city that existed in the days of Jesus. And in that earlier Jerusalem, the garden at Golgotha would have been situated outside the city walls, accessible through a gate that aligned with the historical and scriptural accounts. Together, these discoveries form a powerful mosaic of evidence, where biblical texts, ancient historians, and modern archaeology converge to affirm the authenticity of Golgotha's traditional site. A hill, a garden, a gate, all placed exactly where the gospel writers said they would be. Roughly 11 years after the crucifixion of Jesus, the city of Jerusalem began to grow beyond its earlier limits. As part of this northward expansion, the hill once situated outside the city walls, Golgotha, was now brought within the urban boundaries. But this chapter of growth would be short-lived. In AD 70, Jerusalem fell under siege. The Roman legions, led by Titus, crushed a Jewish rebellion and left the city in smoldering ruins. The temple was destroyed, the city was leveled. What remained was silence and ash. For 60 years, Jerusalem lay in devastation, until Emperor Hadrian arrived in AD 130 with a vision to rebuild. But his goal was not restoration, it was reinvention. Over the sacred ruins of Jewish and Christian history, Hadrian founded a new Roman city, Aelia Capitolina. To erase the memory of the past, he replaced the sacred with the profane. He built Roman temples over the very spaces once held holy, including the hill of Golgotha, long cherished by early Christians as the site of Christ's crucifixion. On that hill, Hadrian commissioned the construction of a temple to Venus, the Roman goddess of love and beauty. The early church father Jerome later recorded, "On the rock where the cross had stood, a marble statue of Venus was set up by the heathen and became an object of worship." The symbolism was deliberate, even provocative. The hill where Christians believed the Son of God had poured out his life in sacrificial love was now dominated by a statue of a pagan goddess. Fragments of that legacy remain. Headless statues, broken reliefs, and remnants of Roman craftsmanship still whisper of that era, when the Roman Empire tried to overwrite the memory of the cross with its own deities and power. But Hadrian's intent backfired. His act of desecration would, paradoxically, preserve the location. By building his temple over Golgotha, Hadrian unintentionally marked the place where generations of Christians had already worshipped in secret. Jerome explained it clearly. The original persecutors indeed supposed that by polluting our holy places, they would deprive us of our faith in the Passion. Instead, their actions became archaeological signposts. The pagan temples they built, the altars they raised, all of it would later serve to confirm, rather than conceal, the site of the crucifixion. Hadrian's decision to construct a temple there was not random. Of the entire city, he chose 2 hills as his temple mounts, one over Mount Moriah, the traditional site of the Jewish temple, and the other over Golgotha, the hill where Christians believed the Lamb of God was slain. It was an act of domination, but it was also an admission. These places mattered. They already carried meaning. They were sacred before Hadrian's stones ever touched the ground. And what god did Hadrian place over Golgotha? Venus, the goddess of love. It is a decision soaked in irony, because for Christians, love is not sensual but sacrificial. It is not found in marble figures, but in the wood of a cross. As the Apostle John wrote in 1 John chapter 3:16, "This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us." And where did he do that? At Golgotha. Of all the hills on earth, none bears the weight of love like this one. Not love as feeling, but love as offering. It was here that God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son to suffer, to die, to redeem, and not even Rome, in all its might and marble, could bury that truth beneath its temples. By placing a statue of Venus, the Roman goddess of sensuality and desire, directly over the sacred hill of Golgotha, Emperor Hadrian enacted more than an act of desecration. He attempted a complete inversion of the Christian message of love. On the very ground where early Christians believed divine, selfless love had been demonstrated, ritual acts of pagan immorality were performed. Yet this very act of defilement would later become a historical marker. Hadrian's temple, erected with calculated intent, revealed to future generations the precise location early Christians had venerated as the site of the crucifixion. The temple itself was elaborate. From the Cardo Maximus, the main artery of Roman Jerusalem, stone stairways ascended the slope of the hill. Roman pilgrims would have climbed these stairs toward the pagan sanctuary, a journey upward that, in hindsight, is steeped in tragic irony. Portions of these stairways and the surrounding infrastructure remain preserved underground. Though modern buildings now rise above them, Hadrian's foundations endure, silent and buried. yet still bearing witness to a layered history of faith, conflict, and transformation. On archaeological models, these ancient stairs can be traced clearly, marking the route from the Roman street below to the summit, the very hill that long before Hadrian's arrival had been sacred to followers of Christ. In the present day, standing atop the eastern roof of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, beside the great dome that marks the traditional location of the Crucifixion, it is possible to look downward across time. Beneath the Crusader church lies a deeper path, a route once traveled by Roman citizens and soldiers, climbing toward a temple raised not to honor Christ but to replace him. Today, that path can be retraced. From the street level of the Cardo Maximus, the ancient route ascends the hill once dominated by empire, a path now ending at the foot of the cross, where, according to Christian tradition, love was redefined forever. The stones visible here, heavy, weathered, and ancient, date from the late Roman period, from the reign of Hadrian himself. They once formed part of the monumental pagan temple constructed to suppress the memory of Christ's sacrifice, but history did not allow it. In AD 324, the Roman Empire changed. Under the reign of Constantine the Great, the first Christian emperor, Hadrian's temple was dismantled. In its place, a Christian basilica was constructed, the Martyrium, dedicated to the crucifixion of Jesus. Nearby, another structure was raised, a rotunda, over the site, but believed to be Jesus' tomb. Together, these buildings, the Martyrium and the Anastasis, formed the spiritual heart of Christian Jerusalem. Throughout the centuries, wars and invasions would lead to the destruction and rebuilding of churches on this hallowed ground. Yet each reconstruction preserved the memory and significance of the site. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built during the Crusader period, now stands as the enduring witness. It continues the tradition of honoring the place where, according to the Christian faith, God descended in sacrifice for humanity. When viewed from above, the present-day Church of the Holy Sepulchre reveals a profound symbol. It is built in the form of a cross. At the center of that cross stands a dome structure, the Dome of Golgotha. In front of it lies the apse, a semicircular architectural feature common to Christian churches, traditionally reserved for moments and spaces of deepest theological significance. A comparison of floor plans reveals a striking continuity. When the top-down layout of Constantine's original 4th century basilica is superimposed onto the modern church, the center of the apse remains unchanged, even though the surrounding structure has been rebuilt multiple times across the centuries. In Constantine's design, the apse faced west, pointing toward the tomb of Christ. In later church reconstructions, the apse was rotated to face east, toward the sunrise, symbolizing resurrection and eternal hope. But through every architectural transformation, one element remained constant: the site of the crucifixion, held firmly at the center of the apse. Beneath the dome of today's church, that journey continues. Modern stairways constructed in recent centuries follow the route of ancient stone steps. Steps once ascended by Roman soldiers, early believers, and crusader pilgrims. These paths lead upward to the eastern exterior of the apse, the precise location historically revered as the place where Jesus was crucified. At this spot, layers of masonry are visibly stacked, each layer corresponding to a different era. Some stones belong to the time of Constantine, others to the Crusaders, and others still to more recent restorations. Together they form a palimpsest of memory, bearing silent witness to destruction, devotion, and endurance. Inside the church, visitors are often guided to an upper room, accessible by a steep and narrow stairway. There a stone is displayed. Many are told that this is Golgotha, but archaeology presents a different view. The true marker of the crucifixion is not a single stone slab, but rather the architecture itself. In churches constructed upon this site throughout the centuries, the crucifixion has always been commemorated at the apse, the architectural focal point of sacred space. On the eastern wall of the upper chamber, a quiet space has been reserved for centuries. Here, pilgrims light candles, kneel in reflection, and gaze toward the center, where a crucifix now stands, precisely aligned with the apse, believed to mark the very site of the cross. This is Golgotha, a place layered in stone, steeped in memory, and shaped by devotion, not because of its architecture or the empires that have risen and fallen around it, but because of a cross and the one who bore it. The crucifix positioned beneath the dome, at the heart of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, identifies the place long honored as the site of Christ's crucifixion. Through centuries of war, destruction, and rebuilding, one thing has never changed. The exact spot at the center of the apse has remained the unchanging anchor. the place to which the eyes of pilgrims, architects, and believers have returned again and again. Today, two principal locations in Jerusalem are associated with Golgotha. The first is the traditional site, preserved within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, explored in depth throughout this narrative. The second lies further north, a rocky escarpment just outside the old city walls, known as Skull Hill, or Gordon's Calvary. The story of Skull Hill, also known as Gordon's Calvary, begins in the year 1842. It was then that a scholar named Otto Thenius observed a skull-like formation carved naturally into the side of a hill just beyond the northern wall of Jerusalem. The resemblance to a human skull seemed more than coincidental, especially given that the word Golgotha, the place of the skull. 4 decades later, in 1883, British General Charles Gordon visited the site and became convinced that this hill, not the traditional location, was the true site of the Crucifixion. Gordon famously drew a skeleton-shaped outline across a map of Jerusalem, placing the skull directly over the hill in question. His theory quickly gained traction, particularly among Protestant and evangelical communities, many of whom still honor the site today. Proponents of Skull Hill often point to passages in the New Testament, especially the reference that Jesus suffered outside the city gate. They argue that Skull Hill's position outside the current walls of the old city strengthens the claim. But archaeology tells a different story. Extensive excavations led by Nahman Avigad revealed the remains of the 1st century city wall and the Garden Gate, confirming that the site of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was located outside Jerusalem's city limits at the time of Jesus. The modern city walls do not correspond to the ancient layout and therefore cannot be used as reliable indicators of where the boundaries once stood. More telling still is what is not found at Skull Hill. Unlike the traditional site, where layers of Christian churches, pagan temples, and Roman structures have been identified, Skull Hill yields no evidence of early worship, no ancient construction, no inscriptions, no traces of desecration or reverence. There is no historical record associating the site with Golgotha before the 19th century. In contrast, the traditional site, preserved beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, has been revered for nearly 2 millennia. Its authenticity is supported by architecture, archaeological remains, and early Christian writings, all converging on the same hill, remembered and marked through centuries of devotion and conflict. In a word, the evidence is staggering. Golgotha is more than a point on a map. It is a place where, according to Christian belief, love became sacrifice, where blood touched stone and eternity intersected with time. Beneath layers of history, under centuries of rubble, and within the heart of Jerusalem, lies the hill where, it is believed, Jesus gave everything so that humanity might live. The story of Golgotha is not just one of place, but of meaning. It invites reflection, it invites remembrance, and perhaps, most powerfully, it invites response. For those moved by this journey through history, faith, and archaeology, like this video to help others discover it. Subscribe for more films exploring the ancient world of the Bible. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded of the love that changed the world. Thank you for watching, and may the story of Golgotha continue to shape faith, awaken hope, and illuminate the true meaning of love.